What would you do if a billionaire caught you witnessing the one secret that could destroy him? Would you take his money and disappear? Or stay, knowing it could cost you everything? Tonight, you'll hear the story of Emma, a woman who sold her silence, but never expected to sell her heart. Before we continue, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for more stories like this. The rain came down in a fine, misty drizzle that seemed to blur the edges of the city. From the street level, New York skyscrapers looked like they were disappearing into the clouds. Emma Blake tightened the thin belt of her worn black coat as she climbed the subway steps. The fabric was damp, clinging to her, but she didn't have time to care. She was already running late. The Ward Grand Hotel loomed across the street like a palace from another world, 40 stories of glass and steel, crowned with lights that made it glow against the grey sky. She'd only ever seen it in glossy magazines and the background of news reports. Inside those walls tonight was the annual Ward Foundation Gala, the kind of event where the rich came to smile for cameras, shake hands with politicians, and remind the rest of the city that they were generous enough to give back. Emma wasn't on the guest list. She was here on assignment for City Pulse, a tiny online magazine that paid her just enough to survive. Her editor had told her to get some decent shots of the guests, maybe a quick quote or two, then to go home and write something positive. No digging. No hard questions. Nothing that might upset the powerful people in the room. As if she'd be able to upset them even if she tried. The revolving glass doors swept her into the hotel's main lobby, where the warmth hit her like a wall. Marble floors reflected the soft golden light from crystal chandeliers. The air smelled faintly of lilies and expensive perfume. She kept her camera bag close to her side and walked with purpose, pretending she belonged here. The trick was to look like you knew where you were going. In the ballroom, the noise hit her all at once, a constant murmur of voices, laughter, and the delicate clink of crystal glasses. Waiters in white jackets glided between guests, balancing trays of champagne. She moved along the edges of the room, taking photographs in quick bursts. Senators, CEOs, actors whose names she only half remembered. And then she saw him. Alexander Ward. He was standing near the far end of the room, speaking with a man Emma recognized as Senator Charles Harper. Alexander's tall frame and sharp suit made him stand out even in a room full of expensive tailoring. His hair was dark, swept back neatly, his features all angles and precision. Even from across the room, there was a weight to his presence, the kind of quiet authority that made people turn toward him without realizing it. Emma knew his reputation. Everyone did. Real estate empire. Ruthless negotiations. The man who could make or break a city block with a single phone call. She lifted her camera, took a few quick shots, and moved on. About half an hour later, she slipped out of the ballroom to find the restroom. The hallway was quieter, the carpet muffling her steps. A row of closed doors lined one side. Private meeting rooms, she guessed. As she passed, one of the doors stood slightly ajar. She wouldn't have looked inside if she hadn't heard the voice. Deep. Calm. Unmistakably confident. Make sure she's gone. No one will find her. Emma froze. She knew that voice. Her pulse quickened as she glanced inside. The room was empty, at least, it looked empty, except for a laptop sitting open on the table. The screen was paused on a grainy video feed, the kind you'd see from a security camera. She stepped inside, heart pounding, and tapped the spacebar. The video came to life. A man, Alexander Ward, sat across from a young woman with long brown hair. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with something between fear and anger. You can't do this, the woman said, her voice trembling. I'll go to the police. Alexander leaned forward, his tone measured, almost patient. You won't. You'll take the money, and you'll disappear. If you don't, his voice dropped lower, deliberate. You won't be found. The woman flinched as he slid a thick envelope across the table. The video cut off there. Emma stood frozen, every instinct screaming that she shouldn't be here. She pulled out her phone, quickly recording the laptop screen. She didn't think, she just acted, her hands shaky as she captured every frame. A sound in the hallway made her turn. Through the crack in the door, she saw him. Alexander Ward. Walking past, heading toward the ballroom. For a moment, his eyes flicked in her direction. The contact was brief, but it felt like a spotlight had been turned on her. Cold. Sharp. Knowing. The next morning was grey and wet. Emma sat cross-legged on her bed, her laptop balanced on her knees, pretending to work while her mind replayed the video over and over. She hadn't told anyone. Not yet. She didn't even know who she could tell. The knock on her door startled her so badly she nearly dropped the laptop. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her heart pounded as she peered through the peephole. And froze. Alexander Ward stood there. He looked as if he'd stepped straight out of the hotel. Dark suit, crisp shirt, tie perfectly in place. Not a hair out of place. Two men in black coats stood just behind him in the hallway, their expressions unreadable. Emma opened the door only a few inches. How do you know where I live? I know a lot of things about you, Alexander said, his voice smooth but edged with steel. May I come in? No. His gaze didn't waver. Then we'll speak here. Emma tightened her grip on the door. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. His tone was almost conversational, but his eyes told a different story. You saw something last night. You recorded it. Now you have a choice. One of the men behind him stepped forward, opening a black briefcase. Inside, stacks of cash sat neatly banded, the edges crisp. This is $5 million, Alexander said. Take it, delete the recording, sign a contract, and walk away. No one will bother you again. Emma stared at the money, her stomach twisting. And if I don't? His answer was quiet, deliberate. Then you'll discover how quickly your life can fall apart. She swallowed. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you protection, he replied. The woman in that video, she made a choice. You should, too. Emma's mind raced. Why me? Why not just take the phone, take the video, and… Because I prefer clean solutions, he interrupted. No loose ends. You're a journalist. You understand the value of control. She hesitated. I'm not interested in your money. Everyone is interested in my money, Alexander said softly. Even those who tell themselves they aren't. He turned to leave, then paused, looking back at her. By the way, the man who followed you home last night? He wasn't one of mine. Next time, you might not be so lucky. And then he was gone, the two men following him down the hall. Emma closed the door and leaned against it, her breath unsteady. She was in trouble. And she wasn't sure there was a way out. Emma barely slept after Alexander's visit. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, calm, controlled, dangerous. The morning was a blur of coffee and pacing. She couldn't decide whether to delete the recording, send it to the police, or bury her phone in the park and walk away from all of it. By noon, the decision was taken from her hands. The buzz of her phone made her jump. Unknown number. Be ready in 10 minutes. We're coming for you. She stared at the message, her stomach twisting. She thought about ignoring it, but she'd already seen what Alexander could do with a simple knock at her door. And she had no doubt he would knock again if she didn't answer. 10 minutes later, a knock sounded. When she opened the door, one of the two men from the previous night was there, tall, broad-shouldered, in a black coat. His face was as unreadable as a statue's. Miss Blake, he said evenly. Mr. Ward is waiting. Emma gripped the door frame. Where? In the car. I'm not going anywhere with you. The man didn't change expression. Then Mr. Ward will come up here. You don't want that. Something in his voice made her believe him. She grabbed her coat. The car was a sleek black sedan, the kind that looked expensive even without a visible logo. The interior smelled faintly of leather and something sharper. Alexander's cologne, she guessed. He was in the back seat, a tablet in his hands. He looked up briefly as she slid in beside him. Emma, he said. Just her name, but somehow it felt like a statement, a decision. She crossed her arms. You said I had 3 days. It's only been 2. I've changed the timeline, he said without looking away from her. Too much has happened already. Her brows knit. Meaning what? Meaning the man who followed you the other night wasn't a coincidence. And he wasn't alone. She stared at him. And you expect me to believe you're the safer option? I expect you to believe the truth, he replied. There are people who would kill for that recording you made. I'm not one of them. Not yet. The way he said not yet made her shiver. The car stopped in front of Ward Tower, a monolith of glass and steel that seemed to rise forever into the grey sky. Inside, the lobby gleamed, polished marble floors, dark wood accents, a front desk manned by 2 uniformed staff. Security cameras tracked their every movement. A private elevator whisked them to the top floor. When the doors opened, she stepped into a penthouse that looked more like the lobby of a 5-star hotel than someone's home. This is where you'll be staying until the contract is signed, Alexander said, walking toward a black desk by the windows. I didn't say I was staying here, she countered. I didn't ask. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick document, sliding it across the desk toward her. She glanced at it. An NDA. Tailored for you, he said. Sign it, and the $5 million is yours immediately. You'll walk out of here protected, wealthy, and free to start whatever life you want. Emma shook her head. And if I don't? He leaned forward slightly. Then you'll stay here until you do. Safer for you. Easier for me. She stepped closer, scanning the paper. This says I can't even mention your name in connection to anything. That's the point, he replied. She looked up at him. Why not just destroy the recording yourself? His mouth curved faintly, not quite a smile. Because I don't want to just erase what you know. I want to own it. That night, she lay awake in the guest room. The penthouse was silent except for the occasional hum of the heating system. She tried the front door earlier, 2 security locks and a discreet keypad she didn't have the code for. She wasn't a prisoner, not exactly, but she couldn't just walk out either. From her window, she could see the city spread out like a sea of lights. Somewhere down there was her apartment, her life. But from up here, it felt impossibly far away. And somewhere else in the penthouse, Alexander Ward was awake, waiting for her to make a choice. The smell of coffee woke her. For a moment, she thought she was home. Then she opened her eyes and saw the unfamiliar room, the soft cream walls, the heavy curtains. She followed the scent into the kitchen. Alexander was there, sleeves rolled up, pouring 2 cups. He glanced at her. Good morning. She blinked at him. You make coffee. He almost smiled. I've been known to do simple things when the situation calls for it. She accepted the cup he handed her but didn't sit. So, do you always keep people in your penthouse until they do what you want? He didn't look offended. Only when necessary. She took a cautious sip. Lucky me. Not luck, he said, leaning against the counter. Choice. You're not easily intimidated. Most people in your position would have signed by now. Maybe I'm not most people. That, he said, is becoming increasingly clear. Later, Emma wandered through the penthouse, taking in details she'd missed last night. Sleek black and white photographs on the walls, a glass cabinet filled with rare books, the subtle hum of hidden security systems. In his office, she noticed a framed photo on a shelf. It showed Alexander with a woman, beautiful, smiling, her hand resting on his chest. Before she could stop herself, she asked, "Who's that?" Alexander looked up from his desk. Rebecca. My fiancée. Was. She died 5 years ago. I'm sorry, Emma said quietly. His jaw tightened. It was an accident. The way he said it, flat, final, made her wonder if it was really the truth. That night, she stepped onto the balcony. The air was cold, the wind tugging at her hair. Below, the city glittered. Alexander joined her a moment later, standing beside her but not too close. "You think I'm a monster," he said without preamble. "I think you're hiding something," she replied. "Both can be true." They stood in silence for a long moment, the city noise a faint hum far below. Finally, he said, "You're safer here than out there. Whatever you think of me, remember that." She looked at him, trying to read his face. But Alexander Ward was a man who could make his expression a fortress. And that, more than anything, made her uneasy. Emma didn't know what woke her, maybe the faint vibration of her phone, maybe just the unease that had been simmering since she'd set foot in the penthouse. She reached for her phone on the nightstand. One new message. Unknown number. "He's lying to you. You're next." Her mouth went dry. She read it twice, the words crawling under her skin. She sat up and listened. The penthouse was silent. Too silent. The next morning, she tried to pretend the message hadn't happened. She even managed to sit across from Alexander at breakfast without blurting it out. But she couldn't help watching him. How calmly he buttered his toast, how precise every movement was. Finally, she couldn't take it. "Do you have enemies?" she asked. He glanced up at her, one eyebrow raised. "Everyone has enemies, Emma. Some just have more powerful ones than others. Someone texted me last night. From an unknown number." His expression didn't change, but the air between them felt sharper. "What did it say?" "That you're lying to me, and that I'm next." He set down his coffee cup with slow precision. "May I see the message?" She slid her phone across the table. He looked at it for a few seconds, then handed it back. "I'll handle it." "That's it. No explanation." "There is nothing I can tell you yet," he said evenly. "But you are not to respond to any unknown messages, calls, or emails. If you get another, show it to me immediately." Emma pushed her chair back, frustration bubbling up. "You think you can just control what I do? Who I talk to?" "Yes," he said simply, his tone so matter-of-fact it stopped her in her tracks. "Because your safety depends on it." That night, she locked her bedroom door, not that it would matter in a place like this. She woke again around 3 a.m., this time to the sound of something off. A faint creak. The brush of movement. Her pulse quickened. She reached for the lamp, but before she could switch it on, she noticed something on the bed. A photograph. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. The woman in the picture had long brown hair, a thin face, and eyes that seemed to hold a mix of defiance and fear. Emma recognized her immediately from the video on the laptop. Clara. The missing woman. The photograph was cold, as if it had been left there only moments ago. She stormed into Alexander's office the next morning, slamming the photo on his desk. "Care to explain?" He studied it for a moment, then looked up at her. "Where did you get this?" "On my bed. Someone came into my room last night." His jaw tightened. "Security," he called, and within seconds, one of the men in black coats entered. "Review every camera from the last 12 hours, Alexander ordered. Floor-by-floor clearance. I want a full report within the hour." When the man left, Alexander turned back to Emma. "The woman in the picture is alive." "Prove it." "I can't," he said, and for the first time, his voice was almost human. "Not yet." Emma didn't believe him. Not really. But the next day, she decided to dig for herself. While Alexander was on a phone call in his office, she wandered into one of the other rooms, what looked like a study, lined with shelves and leather-bound books. On the desk, she noticed a folder, the corner sticking out from under a stack of papers. She shouldn't. She knew she shouldn't. But her fingers moved before her brain could stop them. Inside was a birth certificate. She froze when she saw the name. Clara Lewis. Mother, Elaine Lewis. Father, unknown. Emma's chest tightened. Elaine Lewis was her mother's name. She read the rest twice, her pulse pounding. Clara was her half-sister. She barely had time to process before Alexander's voice came from the doorway. "Find something interesting." Emma jumped, dropping the folder back onto the desk. "You knew," she said, her voice shaking. "You knew she was my sister." "I knew she knew you," he corrected. "I didn't know you were related until recently." "That's a lie," Emma snapped. His expression didn't change. "Believe what you want. But the truth is, if I'd known, I wouldn't have let you anywhere near this." She crossed her arms. "So what happened to her?" "She got involved with the wrong people," Alexander said. "I paid her to disappear. To keep her safe." Emma stared at him, searching for any crack in his composure. But Alexander Ward's face was a mask. That night, lying awake, Emma turned the information over and over in her mind. Clara. Her sister. Alive, or maybe not. Alexander said he'd kept her safe, but nothing about him screamed savior. And yet, something about the way he'd said "I wouldn't have let you near this" felt real. It scared her more than anything, because it meant part of her wanted to believe him. Emma couldn't stop thinking about the photo on her bed. If someone could get into her room that easily, inside Alexander Ward's penthouse, with all its cameras and security, then either his system wasn't as airtight as he wanted her to believe, or someone on the inside had let it happen. And if that was true, maybe Alexander wasn't the one she needed to fear most. The next day, she found herself pacing in the guest room, phone in hand. Her first instinct was to call the police, but she knew that wouldn't end well. Alexander's name carried too much weight. Even if they believed her, she might end up the one in trouble. No. She needed proof. Real proof. Something even Alexander couldn't twist into his version of the truth. So she decided to set a trap. That night at dinner, she kept her tone casual. "You know," she said, cutting into her steak, "I've been thinking, maybe I should sign the NDA." Across the table, Alexander's knife paused mid-cut. His eyes lifted to hers, unreadable. "Have you?" She nodded. $5 million would solve a lot of problems. She forced a small smile. "But before I do, I just want to hear you say it. That Clara is alive." Alexander didn't answer immediately. He set down his utensils, leaned back in his chair. "Why?" "Because I want to know I'm not helping you cover up a murder." The corners of his mouth curved faintly. "You're bolder than I expected." "Is that a yes?" she pressed. He didn't break eye contact. "Yes. She's alive." What Alexander didn't know was that her phone, tucked between the salt and pepper shakers, was recording the entire conversation. If he slipped, even slightly, she'd have it on record. Hours later, while Alexander was on a late-night call in his office, Emma slipped into the study. She searched drawers, scanned papers, looking for anything, an address, a contact list, even a photo that could lead her to Clara. Instead, she found something else. A file labeled Jonathan Hale. She recognized the name, Alexander's right-hand man, the tall, sharp-suited advisor she'd seen with him at the gala. Inside the file were transaction records, meeting logs, and a single, grainy photo of Jonathan sitting across from Clara in what looked like a restaurant. The timestamp was just days before the night she vanished. Footsteps in the hall made her slam the file shut. Alexander appeared in the doorway. "Find what you were looking for." Emma forced her expression to stay neutral. "Just curious." His gaze swept the room. "Curiosity can be dangerous in my world, Emma." "Maybe I like dangerous," she said, brushing past him. She didn't see it, but as she left, his eyes narrowed slightly, calculating. Emma didn't have to wait long for the next move. It happened the following evening. She was in the penthouse's reading room, pretending to browse a book, when the lights flickered. Then the power cut completely. In the darkness, she heard footsteps. Not hurried, measured. "Alexander," she called. No answer. Before she could react, An arm looped around her waist, a hand clamped over her mouth. A low voice whispered in her ear, "Scream and you'll regret it." She struggled, but the grip was iron strong. A sharp, chemical smell hit her nose, something on a cloth. The world tilted. When she woke, she was in a dimly lit warehouse. Her wrists were bound in front of her with zip ties. The cold concrete under her hands made her fingers ache. A familiar voice spoke from the shadows. "Emma Blake. We finally meet properly." Jonathan Hale stepped into the light. His smile was calm, polite, like they were old acquaintances meeting for coffee. "What do you want?" she demanded. "Insurance," he said. "Alexander's been a problem for me for a long time. You are leverage." Emma's heart pounded. "Leverage for what?" "To make him back off. He's too close to something that's mine." Hours, or maybe minutes, later, footsteps echoed in the warehouse. Alexander appeared, flanked by two of his men. His expression was stone, but his eyes were locked on her. Jonathan's smile widened. "See? Works every time. What do you want?" Alexander's voice was low, dangerous. "Simple," Jonathan said. "You forget about the Westbridge deal. You stop digging into my accounts. And in return," he gestured toward Emma, "she walks out of here alive." Alexander's gaze flicked to Emma, then back to Jonathan. "And Clara?" Jonathan chuckled. "She's alive. For now." Alexander stepped closer, and Emma saw something change in his eyes, something cold, final. In one fluid motion, he drew a gun and fired. Jonathan staggered, shock flashing across his face before he collapsed. The sound still echoed in the warehouse when Alexander turned to his men. "Get her out of here." Back in the car, Emma sat in silence, her wrists free but her heart still pounding. "You killed him," she said finally. "Yes." "Just like that." "There was no other way," Alexander said, eyes on the road. "He would never have stopped." She turned toward him. "What about Clara?" He glanced at her briefly. "We'll find her." For the first time since she'd met him, she almost believed him. Emma expected Alexander to drive back to the penthouse. Instead, he turned the Bentley down a darkened expressway, the city lights shrinking in the rearview mirror. For 20 minutes, he said nothing, his hands steady on the wheel, jaw locked in a way she'd come to recognize. When he was like this, he wasn't the charming billionaire from magazine covers, he was the man people whispered about but never confronted. She finally broke the silence. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safer," he said. His voice was low, calm, but too calm, like someone keeping an animal from bolting. Jonathan wasn't working alone. "There are others, and they'll come." Emma tightened her grip on the door handle. "And you think this safe place will stop them?" "It will slow them," he said. "That's all we need for now." The building they arrived at was unlike his other properties. No guards in suits, no glass elevators or gold accents, just a clean, faceless skyscraper on the city's edge. The kind of place people walked past without remembering. The top floor was an open loft, dimly lit. Walls of tinted glass framed the skyline. There was a leather sofa, a few scattered chairs, and a desk in the corner with papers and an untouched cup of coffee. Alexander gestured for her to sit. "I'll make a few calls. Don't touch anything on that desk." Which, of course, guaranteed she would. As soon as he stepped into the side office, speaking low into his phone, Emma walked to the desk. Her eyes landed on a metal case, locked, but beside it was a stack of photographs. The first one stopped her cold. Clara. Alive. She looked thinner, her hair darker and tied back, eyes cautious but alert. Behind her was a beige hotel room, curtains drawn. A timestamp in the corner read only 3 weeks ago. Emma's hands shook as she flipped through the others. Clara in a cafe, sipping tea. Clara walking down a street, bundled in a coat. Clara sitting at a table with an unfamiliar man. Someone had been following her. Where is she? Emma's voice cut through the air when Alexander came back. His eyes dropped to the photos in her hand, then back to her face. She's under guard. Guarded from who? From people far worse than Jonathan Hale. Bring me to her, Emma said. Her voice was steady, but her heart was pounding. Emma. No. I'm done being kept in the dark. You've been holding on to this all along. I want to see her. For a moment, his expression didn't change. Then he said, tomorrow. At first light. That night, Emma didn't sleep. She lay on the sofa, watching the ceiling shadows shift with passing headlights. Every possibility ran through her mind. What Clara would say, what Alexander wouldn't, what truth was waiting on the other side of dawn. When she finally closed her eyes, the last thought in her mind was a promise she made to herself. If I have to drag her out, I will. The road to Clara was long and silent. Fog clung to the fields as they left the city behind. Alexander drove with both hands on the wheel, his gaze fixed ahead. After an hour, they turned down a narrow gravel lane lined with tall hedges. A modest, two-story house came into view. It looked harmless, like the kind of place grandparents might live. Two men stood by the door. They were armed, but their eyes flicked to Alexander and they stepped aside. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and laundry detergent. A single lamp cast a warm glow over the living room. And then Emma saw her. Clara. She was sitting at a table, a blanket draped around her shoulders. When her eyes lifted and met Emma's, they widened with shock. Emma! Emma's chair scraped the floor as she rushed forward. She wrapped her arms around Clara, holding her as if she could make up for all the lost time in one embrace. You're alive, Emma breathed, her voice breaking. God, I thought. I know, Clara whispered, her arms tightening. I know. But when they pulled back, Clara's face had changed. Her eyes flicked past Emma to Alexander, her voice colder. You shouldn't have brought her here. Emma froze. What? Alexander's voice was even. Tell her, Clara. Clara's jaw tightened. I didn't vanish because of him. I vanished because I stole from the wrong people. Alexander got me out before they could kill me. Emma shook her head. That's not, no. That doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense, Clara said. If you'd known, they'd have come for you too. Emma turned on Alexander. You knew this all along. I told you she was alive. You also let me believe you might have killed her. He didn't answer, and his silence was worse than a lie. Before Emma could say more, the sound of tires crunching on gravel sliced through the air. Alexander's head snapped toward the window. His voice sharpened instantly. Stay here. But Emma followed him to the doorway, heart pounding. 3 black SUVs were pulling into the driveway. Men in dark clothing spilled out, armed, moving with grim precision. Inside, now. Alexander barked. Emma grabbed Clara's hand, dragging her toward the back of the house. But before they reached the door, one of the men appeared, gun raised. Emma froze. Her grip on Clara tightened. Then, a gunshot. The man collapsed at their feet, and behind him stood Alexander, his own weapon smoking. His gaze locked on Emma. Go. They ran through the back door into the yard. But gunfire cracked from the front, splintering the wooden fence. Clara stumbled, and Emma pulled her toward a row of hedges. Somewhere behind them, Alexander's voice was a command in the chaos. Cover the left. Keep them off the house. Emma's lungs burned as she pushed Clara ahead. Keep moving. A shout from their right. 2 men appeared, cutting them off. One raised his gun. Emma thought this was it. But another shot rang out, dropping him instantly. Alexander emerged from the smoke, his left shoulder bleeding through his shirt, his expression as cold as stone. Get in the car, he ordered, nodding to a black SUV parked behind the house. Emma helped Clara climb inside, then slid in herself. Alexander got behind the wheel, slammed the door, and the tires screamed against the gravel as they tore away. For miles, no one spoke. The adrenaline still thrummed in Emma's veins, her mind looping the same thought: we almost died. Again. Finally, she said, "Why? Why risk all this for us?" Alexander's eyes stayed on the road. Because some things are worth more than money. By nightfall, Clara was in another safe house, this one deeper underground in Alexander's network. Emma went back to the penthouse, but it no longer felt like a cage. It felt like the eye of a storm. When Alexander came to her that night, he leaned in the doorway. "You have a choice now. Take the money and walk away. Or stay." Emma looked at him, at the man who had frightened her, manipulated her, saved her, and risked his life for her. "If I stay," she said quietly, "what does that mean?" "It means you stay in my world, knowing exactly what it is." Emma didn't answer right away. She thought about Clara, about the people who had just tried to kill them, about the weight of the truth. Then she said, "I'm not leaving." For the first time, Alexander's mouth curved, not quite a smile, but close. "Then we begin." 3 weeks later. The city was dressed in glass and light, skyscrapers glittering like towers of ice. Emma stood at the edge of the penthouse balcony, the wind tugging her hair as she looked down at the street far below. Her reflection in the glass was almost unfamiliar: sleek black dress, diamond earrings, a quiet poise she hadn't worn before. She didn't feel like the same woman who had stumbled into Alexander's orbit by accident. She wasn't. Inside, the air was warm and scented with champagne. The dining table was set for 12, the silver polished to a mirror shine. Alexander's guests were some of the most dangerous people in the city, though none would ever admit it. CEOs, political powerhouses, a man whose name never appeared on paper but whose orders toppled companies. Alexander was already at the head of the table, speaking in low tones to a man Emma knew had been behind one of the attacks 3 weeks ago. She didn't flinch. She didn't even look away. When the man noticed her, he smiled faintly. "And who might this be?" Alexander didn't answer for her. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, eyes never leaving hers. Emma stepped forward, resting one hand on the back of the man's chair. Her voice was calm, even warm. "I'm the reason you're still sitting here tonight." The man's smile faltered. Dinner began. Conversation shifted from harmless pleasantries to veiled threats dressed as business proposals. Emma listened, learned, and when her turn came, she spoke with a confidence that surprised even herself. She didn't repeat Alexander's words. She added her own, small but sharp, a reminder that she was more than just his shadow. Later, when the guests had gone and the city was quiet again, Alexander joined her on the balcony. "You handled yourself well," he said. Emma didn't look at him. She watched the streets far below, the tiny lights moving like veins through the city. "I told you I wasn't leaving. And now?" She turned to him. "Now I'm not just staying." She smiled faintly. "I'm learning." Alexander's expression was unreadable for a long moment. Then he nodded once, as if sealing an unspoken agreement. Behind them, the penthouse doors swung shut, and the city stretched out before them like a map waiting to be redrawn. Emma had kept her silence. But it was no longer because of his bargain. It was because, in this world, power spoke louder than truth. And she had just learned to speak its language. And that's how Emma learned that in Alexander's world, power spoke louder than truth, and she had just learned to speak its language. If this story pulled you in, let me know in the comments what moment hit you the hardest, and don't forget to like and share so more people can experience it.